The public conception of air combat lags behind considerably by a factor of decades. Many people still think of air combat as two planes maneuvering for favorable positions and an honorable duel, each pilot pushing themselves and their plane to the limit. This has never really been true, or at least not the norm. There are instances of pilots dogfighting all through World War I up to and including Desert Storm, but these are the exceptions and not the typical. Even in the heyday of dogfighting, the public perception of air combat wasn't very accurate. The vast majority of combat was conducted by following what is referred to as the OODA loop. OODA stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. The idea is you want to minimize your risk and maximize your value output by observing the enemy, orienting your observations towards a solution, deciding when to act, and finally acting with intent and without hesitation. This is the OODA loop. The vast majority of battles involved observing and taking in information of the enemy movements and actions, then orienting the observations accordingly towards deciding when and how to act to neutralize enemy capability in a way that minimizes their threat while maximizing friendly effectiveness. For this reason, the vast majority of aerial encounters were pilots flying below and behind the enemy's blind spot, shooting them out of the sky before they had any idea what happened. Ultimately, the primary factor for determining the battle was who had the most situational awareness. The performance of the aircraft were then secondary factors that facilitated the exploitation of situational awareness. Modern combat hasn't changed much fundamentally in that it's still primarily decided by who has the most situational awareness. What has changed is the extent nations have developed tactics and technology to gain and deny that situational awareness. Immediately after World War II, the US, USSR, and EU nations invested heavily in jamming equipment to deny situational awareness to the enemy. Aircraft were developed to fly high as to avoid radar altogether. Even if they were detected, flaws in the radar systems themselves meant that they weren't able to track these aircraft due to their speed and height. When that stopped being viable, aircraft started flying low to the surface to exploit the ground clutter that plagued radars at the time. By the time Desert Storm kicked off in 1991, there was a transition towards having every aircraft be a sensor platform with networking capabilities to relay that information. This eventually led to the development of the system of systems philosophy, where every asset fulfills a role in a grander scheme instead of working in isolation. With the advent of stealth, the game has changed once again, much like it did with the advent of jamming technology. Now you have a new suite of technologies to use in conjunction of established technologies to once again deny the enemy of situational awareness. Modern air combat now is about tracking everything and everywhere, because fundamentally the driving factor has, and always will be, who has the lead in situational awareness. Whoever can complete the OODA loop faster and more often will be the winner. For this reason, the ability to engage outside the zone of situational awareness of the enemy is paramount. With long-range missiles, it meant that you can engage before the enemy could see you visual. The increased performance of fourth-generation fighters maintained that same edge, allowing them to see much further and impart much more energy to their missiles. There is another common misconception that air combat has been boiled down to simply pushing a button to launch a missile over long range and waiting for the enemy to blow up. This is the ideal circumstance where one side has all the situational awareness while the other has none. This couldn't be further from the truth, however. You do have a push to enable sensors to detect enemy assets as quickly and as far away as possible, as there is safety in the additional standoff. However, jamming and stealth will mitigate the standoff advantage unless sufficiently countered. Passively collecting signals intelligence allows you to observe the enemy without giving your own position away, but that is also easily countered by simply disabling active sensors. Determining the average range of the engagement is extremely difficult, as you have multiple technologies that directly counter each other, creating a game of rock, paper, scissors. On top of the extreme complexity depicted here, there are additional factors. Communication relays, in which case literally every single aircraft is one now, is prone to malware distribution, especially if the communication relay has read-write access to the machine it's attached to. The US Air Force has already sent data to an F-16 to engage SAMs in real time, which means it's entirely possible to upload some form of malware, as that's dependent on hardware, software, and policy mitigation, what is actually known of the system architecture, and the creativity of the malware programmer. Additionally, maintenance is another factor. Despite the best efforts, sometimes things go wrong. Perhaps a radar malfunctions, humidity causes a short, a weapon bay door gets stuck open or something. These two are contributing factors as to the effectiveness of a platform, as all platforms will need to operate at nothing short of peak performance at nearly all times. Performance also isn't static. Multiple radar systems can and will cause interference, sometimes constructive, sometimes destructive. Other times, something as random as the sun getting angry can ruin electronic performance as well.
A solar storm is causing satellites recently launched by SpaceX to fall out of orbit.
One last factor to consider is the performance of the enemy equipment isn't going to be well understood. Aircraft routinely fly with their radars off, or with fuel tanks or other devices to ruin their stealth profile to avoid the enemy from gaining useful knowledge of their capabilities. This level of uncertainty is why China overflies Taiwan on a daily basis, which you can hear more about in my video about Taiwan. The conclusion of this discussion is the complexity of modern air combat stems from very simple principles that have cascading effects. Because of the complexity of these competing factors, it's nearly impossible to comprehend what a modern near-peer battle would look like. Many factors compete to extend the ranges further and further, while other factors compete to bring the ranges in closer and closer. It's entirely possible that detection ranges may bring in both fighters within the minimum abort range of both aircraft's weapons, leading to mutual destruction. For this reason, drones acting as martyrs may become necessary to gain the targeting data for other manned aircraft at a safe distance. What is known is that the deciding factor will be gathering and denying information, and being able to process that information faster than the enemy. More time will be spent probing and analyzing than there will be actual fighting. Even then, the pace of combat has only increased as time progresses. World War II took 6 years. Desert Storm took a month. It's possible the next major air war would be decided in about a week. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. This channel serves to make complex aviation topics more digestible to the average viewer. If you like this content, please subscribe. In the meantime, enjoy your dance with the angels.